So I was thinking today about a situation that I was reading in the papers, online. Uh, Not that you can believe everything that you hear, um, and I'm always conscious of the fact that certainly in these last years, much more alive to the fact that you can't truly believe everything that you read because things are recorded from a slant, right? I mean, we know this. I mean, this is something that we've known for forever, really, since the media kind of was introduced to the world. And that there was always somebody somewhere who is manipulating the words and generating a presentation which is a representation of what may or may not be true. And especially these days, especially the explosion that there's been in the fake news, they call it, and false stories, and stories that have some truth but are actually padded out with somebody's perception of that truth, or just downright lies, which means that you have to question everything. You cannot accept anything as being accurate. And I think that's really quite revelatory. When you recognise that everything that you're surrounded by, all the news media, all the stories, whether it's about a political thing or whether it's about just a personality, you cannot believe anything. You cannot believe anything without evidence. And I was really thinking about that from a sort of psychological perspective, in that it's very similar to how we operate as humans, right? And we kind of, when we have experiences in our lives and we see things, that our brain reports those things to us in a not always accurate fashion. I think that's a really interesting idea. If you liken the two, the kind of the idea of media that is out in the world representing the reality in a very skewed manner. We do exactly the same in terms of our own perceptions, not just the things that we see outside of ourselves, but in terms of the things that we reflect on inside of ourselves. So the things that people say around us, the things that people communicate to us, the words and the actions that other people around us may or may not take, we look at that and it's reported to our senses in a filtered way. And the filter is the distortion of how we were raised and how we've grown up, the things that we found ourselves in, the experiences we've had. And of course, if we've had traumas or any other kind of sort of distortion to the way that we see ourselves in the world we live in, those kinds of stimulus aren't reported to us in an accurate way. They are reported to us in an inaccurate way. And then we believe them, right? Because and that's actually the sort of really difficult part of this, is we believe those whispers that are reported to us by our brain and by our external kind of stimulus. That whatever it is that we are presented by is the truth, and those things pass to us without any filter of evidence. I mean, real, true evidence. And this is the same, the whole basis of anxiety. When you look at what anxiety is and how that functions, which is, it's really a fear response, right? So you're fearful of something, you generate anxiety, and the anxiety is the trigger that either tells you to run, to hide, or to fight. Okay. So the idea is that we get stimulus, it's reported to us that something has happened, and then we analyze it. We look at what this is, this information, and then our brains come take over, and our bodies take over, and then we are in a state, in a relevant state according to how that stimulus has been reported to us. So we see it as a threat or a potential threat, or in some way a discomfort, so we react to it. But for the most part, when you break it down and you look at it in a really sort of clear way, you recognise it as being inaccurate, which means that We are reacting and therefore having our lives modified and moderated and changed in a really quite profound way by a lie, really. We lie to ourselves, because what's happening is, here is a trigger, here is something that reports to us something, and because of our experiences, we overlay on top of that experience our previous experience. So what we are reacting to and responding to has nothing to do, almost always, with the event that we are in at that precise moment. It has everything to do with a previous experience of a similar event. So the real fundamental piece of work is to begin to work out what is a lie, what is a distortion, and what is the truth. And that's always very difficult, because our minds have a way of convincing us that what we are concluding as a result of the things that are happening around us is accurate and true. And there is no capacity to evidence that analysis or that conclusion, because we're already triggered. So we need something to step into the middle of that, something to buffer that distortion, to give us an opportunity to analyze something and look at something through the basis of evidence. And what do I mean by evidence? Evidence is the thing that tells you that there is no threat, that there is nothing to be anxious about. And there's so many kind of therapeutic models that help with this, like exposure therapies is one, for instance, where over the course of time you're exposed to whatever it is that you're fearful of and anxious about in small doses until you build up a tolerance to it. Really what you're doing is you're reprogramming your mind and your stimulus and reactionary sort of processes in order for you not to respond in a way that is inaccurate and distorted and based on the actual event that you're experiencing, not on a past event. So exposure therapy literally does that. It exposes you to whatever it is that you are reacting to in increasingly more sort of doses until you realise and feel that, in a sense, reprogram your body so it doesn't respond anymore in that way. So finally, what that really brings me to is the idea that you have to challenge everything. Everything you think, everything you react to, everything that generates a response that is beyond, a kind of standard response. When it's an emotionally charged, overwhelming feeling, it does not belong in the moment that you are experiencing. Almost always, it belongs in a past moment. It belongs in a past event. So evidence is the key. We need to find a way to buffer, to give ourselves the space and capacity to be able to properly look at what it is that we're experiencing in the moment, and apply evidence to that stimulus, and then decide properly, whether it warrants a reaction or not. So it's evidence, and then it's reflection, not reaction. And this is one thing you'll hear me say an awful lot in terms of the work that I do. It's about looking at something from a reflective perspective rather than a reactive perspective. And the end result of that is you get to live your life, you get to minimise the anxiety, you get to minimise the depressive thoughts and feelings, and you get to be released into seeing the world in a more accurate kind of perspective. So I hope that helps, and join me for another one of these very soon. Speak to you then. Bye for now.